Hey, good morning, Holly. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I know it's a fantastic Wednesday morning, starting to kick off this webinar series that we've got going for you today between Commonwealth Technology, Visual Edge IT, and a number of our keynote speakers, such as Joy Beelan, that will be speaking for us shortly and doing a phenomenal presentation. So during this time, obviously, our goal here is to be able to help make sure that we're educating everybody along the way. Our goal is not to sell. Our goal is to educate here. So hopefully you guys can join us throughout this series. Continue to build your technology playbook, making it a bit more of a secure, remote distributed environment based on the environment that we're all finding ourselves in today. So with that, I'm going to wind up introducing a couple of very important people during this time, least of which is myself, being Brian Beck. I'm over here. I'm the Indiana branch manager for Commonwealth Technology. I have the privilege of being able to work very closely with the Visual Edge IT team and getting to know a number of the partners that help to support us in being able to bring the technology solutions and education to you, everybody who's joining us today, and all of our customer base across the Midwest. So I'm very privileged with that. I've had a long history working with MSPs, managed service providers, managed network services, some people may know it as. Also managed print services, developing programs across the Midwest for small and large dealerships and OEMs alike. So I've had a long history in this area, but the people that really have the expertise that are here with us today, first of which I'd like to introduce Travis Tilbury, Vice President of IT Sales over there at Visual Edge IT. Travis, would you like to speak a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I've been Vice President of IT Sales for the last 2 years at Visual Edge IT. I was originally a business owner for End-to-End Technologies, a local branch here out of Indiana as well. I started off as an engineer and have converted into a sales role. But yeah, I'm happy to be here today and looking forward to this presentation. So thank you, Brian.
Thanks for joining us, Travis. And our keynote speaker here today, who also just happens to have been very recently, I believe it was yesterday, named to one of CRN's 2020's top women of the channel, Joy Beelan.
Thank you. I appreciate that introduction. It's such an honor to be here, Brian and Travis. Thank you for having me. So I've worked with the small business industry for 22 years now, and specifically focused on cybersecurity since 2014. And what that means is that I have been, certified by the SANS Institute as a security awareness professional. And my mission is to save as many small businesses as I can from the world of cybercrime. So I've been doing a lot of work with companies like Visual Edge and Commonwealth, and I'm here to talk to you a bit today about some things you might want to be aware of while you're working remotely, and considerations as we go through working through the COVID scenario to make sure that everybody's staying as safe as possible and protecting the privacy of their own data as well as the company's data. So let's go ahead and get a start on that. First of all, the vulnerabilities of working outside the company network. That's kind of one of the ways that we like to look at this, is that both inside and outside of the company network, there's a lot of things that you might want to consider, but we have 100% remote workforce right now. And the reason this is so important, if you didn't know this, 3.2% of the United States workforce worked remotely prior to COVID. 3.2%. And 44% of the companies and businesses across the United States did not allow remote workers at all. So you can imagine what's happened with the transition from everybody going within the office walls, counting on their IT people and the infrastructure at the office to keep their data safe, moving into the home environment now. But there's, outside of COVID-19, what we're seeing is that there's a bunch of different things that might cause you to continue to work remotely. Even before this happened, that we have things like natural disasters, sick dependents, whether it's a child or a parent, right? And there's a lot of reasons that wanting to make sure that your home environment is secure is something that goes beyond COVID-19. So Visual Edge and Commonwealth really want to make sure that you understand it's not just the company data, but it's the privacy of your own home that they want to be protecting. So a couple of things that we're going to cover today, and I'm going to walk through these in a high level. I work specifically with small businesses and individuals. So the way that I speak about cybersecurity is going to be understandable and relatable. But what we're going to do is walk through why this is so important, who it's happening to. I think there's a big myth out there that small businesses are not targets, how the bad guys are even getting in, and then some things you can do to go through your home network and help to protect yourself. So we're going to start with why is it so important and who is it happening to? Cybercrime is very big in the small business sector. And as a matter of fact, more than half of the cybercrime that happens is happening to small businesses. One of the biggest reasons that is that small businesses have a much smaller budget to invest in protecting their company network. And they have a lot less resources in the way of skill level of people that are helping them. If they have internal IT, what I found when I worked with small businesses is sometimes they had, the owner had a nephew that was really savvy at computers, and they'd say, oh, let's just have Josh come in and fix that real quick or set up this new workstation. And when you're not having a company like Visual Edge or Commonwealth handle every single thing that happens on the network, what you have is somebody that may be savvy with IT, but unaware of how technology, and especially making people more productive or installing new things on the network, might leave them exposed. So the same thing happens in home offices, is that you might have somebody that's helping you in your extended family or your friend circle to help you with your home office, but they're not aware of cybersecurity. And that's why we're doing this today. The other thing is that a lot of times a small business is not going to be replacing and upgrading their equipment as often as the large enterprise level businesses are. And the older equipment gets more and more vulnerable over time because the bad guys are seeking out ways that they can get into unpatched systems. But overall, one of the things I want to dispel right now is that when these small businesses are being targeted by the hackers, one of the things the hackers do is they send out an email to like 300,000 email addresses at a time. And they are not specifically looking to see who's receiving that email. They just want to know who's going to click on it. And then they get into the computer and start to do some recon to see what they have to take advantage of now. When you look at that kind of spray effect or casting a wide net for what the hackers are doing, it's really astonishing because a small business that might be 250 employees or less, and I know that's actually a fairly large business in some worlds, but a small business might receive 6 of those if they're just sprayed out, right? And a large enterprise company that has 2,500 or more employees might receive 11 of those emails. So you can see by ratio, the amount of employees at a small business, you're going to have a much larger percentage of those employees being tempted to click on things that they shouldn't and may not know any better. While the larger companies have really good email filters in place, a tremendous amount of training that's happening, very locked down environments. So they have a much smaller percentage of their employees that are going to be tempted to click on something that they shouldn't. And then also, as I mentioned, more than half of the companies that are being targeted and now being susceptible to cybercrime are small businesses. And it was 58% in 2018. It's up to 64% in 2019. So let's take a little bit more look at what's happening with the world of organized cybercrime. This is something that's pretty astonishing to most people. They don't realize that when you map out what an organized cybercrime syndicate looks like, they are so well funded and well organized. When I saw this is an actual map of an operation of an organized crime gang that was completed by a company called Checkpoint Research. And they had seen that one of their enterprise level companies was being hacked. So while the hacking was in progress, they were able to go through and do recon on the company or the organized crime syndicate that was hacking them. And what this surprised me with is it looks just like an org chart, doesn't it? If you start at the top right-hand corner, instead of kingpin, you say, well, that's the CEO or the president of the company, all the way down to the bottom left-hand side where you have the victim. That could normally be a customer. So it's almost like they have their own org charts that are happening with very well-established processes. Now, this is happening because there is such a reach or extent of data that has been compromised that they are able to sell on the dark web. And a lot of people don't understand what the dark web is, so I'm going to take just a minute to walk through it for us, okay? Now, what you're seeing here, and if we were to represent it with a iceberg, for example, at the top, what's floating above the water is just a small bit of what that iceberg generally is. And what that would represent in this scenario is you using your regular computer with a regular browser, going to regular websites. The ones that are shown as examples are a lot of things that we might do for personal reasons, like doing, say, web searches or answering email on the web. But there's also banking sites. There's a lot of sites that require you to log in with a username and a password to access sensitive data, whether it's personal to you or it's sensitive to the organization that you work with. Now, directly under that and represented by about 2/3 of that iceberg there is the deep web. We call it the deep web because that is information that generally belongs to a company that is going to be gated behind some kind of a firewall. So you have the perimeter of your office, if you will, with people using the internet, but behind that, secure in the office infrastructure is all of the data that the company uses in order to perform its daily functions. So that could be things like your company databases, your client list, all of your payroll information, all the information that you want to protect that's part of your company. And at the very bottom is a whole nother, what we call the dark web, and it's a whole nother form of communication separate from the normal internet, accessible only by special tools. You can't get there with the regular browser, and you have to have a special skill set to get there. Nobody's accidentally going to get onto the dark web and go, oh, well, how did I get here through my Google Chrome browser? You have to have a very specialized skill set. Now, this form of communication that's being used is for bad guys and crime or law enforcement as well. But the bad guys are, what they're doing is they're stealing, manipulating people into giving them their credentials. They're getting into that deep web type of data. They're stealing it and they're selling it on the dark web. And when they do that, what happens is that they take these credentials that are being stolen and sold on the dark web, and they go right back up to those normal websites that we use on a daily basis to try to use those credentials to get into those websites, right? So the length of time that hackers are going to be in a organization's network with those stolen credentials is more than 6 months. Why is that? Well, because they really want to understand what is the value of the data that they've now compromised. And the record right now is being held at 19 minutes for a Russian hacker to have bought an email address and a matching password on the dark web, used it on the very top layer there to get into a corporate network website, which accessed all of their deep web content and start to sell that content on the dark web. So the thing is that it's a race against time, and dark web monitoring is really important because of this. If you don't know that your credentials are being sold, you don't have the opportunity the minute they hit the dark web to change that password and then figure out where else have you used that email address and that same password. You might need to go to other websites and change it as fast as you can, right? So the result of these things being sold on the dark web is, number one, all the ransomware that's happening out there. Number two is business email compromise, where they're getting people to go in and accidentally transfer money because of an email that they received, or provide sensitive information. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But $36,000, it says here, in 2019 was the average. And I would like to actually tell you that that's probably double what that figure is, because it doesn't take into account the loss of the customers, because the customers don't have faith that you're going to protect their data, tarnishing your brand. And even what we're seeing is that we have employees leaving these businesses because the business owners that aren't protecting the customer data, their own employees are pretty mortified and feel it's a lack of integrity, that they don't see that the ownership of the business is protecting that data for their customers. So there's a lot of influx that's happening that's very expensive to a small business. The other thing that you should know is that even if you have a really good backup and you think, well, if we happen to get hit by ransomware, what we're going to do is just restore from backup so we won't have to pay the ransom. That's great. But the new trend that we're seeing now is that when the bad guy gets into the network and before he actually makes his presence known by saying, we're going to extort you, we need to have, $30,000 if you want to have access to your data. Before they even do that, what they're doing without your knowledge is stealing the data off of the network. So they're making a copy and they're bringing it off of your network onto their own servers. And that way, if you come back and say, well, we have a really good backup, we don't need to pay for the ransom, then they're going to just take that data that they've already stolen and they're going to sell it on the dark web because they're out to make money. The bad guys are looking for a return on their investment. So they're not going to spend 6 months on the network and not get paid for it. And then here's a really interesting slide. It's these are some price lists that we found on the dark web. We put them into a graphical format for you. And I know it's a little bit difficult to read, but there's groups of data. And according to the group of data and the quality of the data, they have a different price list of what they can expect to receive on the dark web when they're selling this stolen content. What I want to call out is just this one line that I thought was hysterical, because people think that it's not really well organized, but it is. They know exactly what they're doing. And what I have circled in the center there, if you can't read it, is that on this price list, they're selling credit scores, credit reports of unwitting victims. And they happen to know that a credit report with a score, a FICO score of 750 or higher, is more valuable than a credit score lower than 750. So they're asking $150 for that particular type of credit report. They know exactly what they're doing. These guys are extremely familiar with the American financial systems, and they know exactly how to make some money. So I'm going to pause here for a second. We're going to do something fun. When we bring up a poll, which we're about to do, I want you to see, and I may have actually skipped one. Did I skip a poll? I think that we're on a dark web poll here.
We are on the dark web poll.
Okay, super. What I want you to know is when you answer this poll, it's an anonymous answer. It's not going to be tied back to who answered what, but it's kind of fun to look through the audience and have you answer so that we can show the aggregated results. And what I want to know is, have you been monitoring on the dark web to make sure that your company's credentials are not being sold? Let's go ahead and take a look, either yes or no, if you've received a dark web report to see what's being sold. What we generally do is wait for about 80% of the audience to answer, and then we're going to close the poll and share those results with everybody. How's that looking, Sean? All right. And, ooh, wow. 3/4 of you have not received any kind of a dark web report to see if you have credentials being sold on the dark web. So that's the first step, is making sure that you understand when those credentials have been compromised so you can get out there right away and make sure that that all of those passwords are changed so that the hackers can't use that password against you. Okay, let's move to the next part here. We're going to talk about how those bad guys are getting in. Now, normally I would show a video here, but what we've seen is that over time, the video quality gets a little distorted depending on the end user's bandwidth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a URL, and we're going to put this in the chat and provide this to you. It's a 4-minute video. When you finish the webinar today, what you should do is just pull this YouTube video up, watch this 4-minute video, because it walks through how a hacker does social engineering. Social engineering is a term that we use in cybersecurity for really, it's just the old con game. It's a hacker trying to fool somebody into clicking on something that they shouldn't, or they're impersonating someone that you might trust in order to have you provide information that would normally be sensitive information. So we're going to skip the video for right now, but we will go ahead and put that into the chat. so that you can watch that as soon as we're done with our webinar today. The ransomware and the business email compromise, those are the two that are the most common. So when I talk about clicking on something that you shouldn't, what you want to know is that as you go through social engineering training, which is what we're going to talk about in a few minutes here, being able to identify what does a fake email look like or what does a fake website look like is going to be a tremendous advantage for you. And that's what we call security awareness training. But let's take a look. We have a list of 18 things that we're going to walk through. These 18 things, and again, this is something that Commonwealth and Visual Edge is going to be providing to you as a checklist, and they can walk through each of these with you. But these are all the things that we can do to make sure that your home office or your remote workplace is going to be secure as you continue to go in and out of working remotely as the norm for a while, okay? So the first thing, and I'm not going to dive into each of these 18 things, but I'm going to do a quick overview. Number one, make sure you understand how the equipment is connected. Now, a lot of you have already taken your work equipment from the office to your home. If you do this in the future and you have any new equipment, just take a photo of how everything is connected. And that way, when you get home, you can reconnect it without wondering, why don't I have any sound? You know, there's so many problems that people come up with while they're trying to work remotely, and it's frustrating, right? Number two, make sure that you use a power strip. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but if you plug your computer, whether it's a laptop or a desktop, if you plug that directly into the wall and the power all of a sudden goes out at your house, you could actually fry your hard drive. That's very hard and damaging for a hard drive, and that would mean that your computer just won't start up again. So if you don't have a power strip or a battery backup, make sure that you get one. You can order one on Amazon. You can ask Visual Edge or Commonwealth what they recommend for you, okay? Make sure if you're going to be on camera that you understand what's in your background. I can't tell you how many people I've seen that have people walking back and forth, kids running in. So are you making sure that, you know, you have the door closed? I'll tell you, when I'm doing mine, there's a sign at the bottom of the stairway that you see through the side there that says on the air. It's a joke that my boyfriend and I have for each other. But whenever either of us is on a video call, we turn on the air sign so that the other knows not to just walk in and give the other a kiss, or although that's always fun. All right, and make sure, so this is my personal thing, and some of you are going to be laughing at this, but I dress for success every day, even though I'm working from my home, whether I'm going to be on camera or not. It has a lot to do with my mental attitude and my focus on business-related activity. So up to you, but just my personal tip I like to throw in there. The next thing is making sure your computer is up to date. If you have Windows 7, you are in a heap of trouble. You really, really must upgrade your computer to Windows 10. And once it's updated, you want to make sure you understand how to go in and check to make sure that all of the patches that are issued by Microsoft have been applied to your computer. Are you a Mac user? Same thing. Those updates that are issued by Windows and by Mac, 90% of them are for security reasons and not just to enhance your user experience. So you might say to yourself, is it really important? Heck yes, that's the answer. The other thing you want to make sure of is any of the applications you use on a regular basis on your home computer, that those are updated as well. So an example might be Microsoft Office, Adobe, Google Apps, any of those that are installed as a program on your computer. Generally, if you go to the help menu, you're going to find that there's a menu option that says check for updates, and always keep those up to date. The next thing is that if you have antivirus or anti-malware installed on your computer, a lot of times people don't invest on their home computer to make sure that they have a really good brand or version running that is going to constantly update itself. And that would mean if you're relying on inexpensive or free types of antivirus or anti-malware solutions, you might have to go into the actual software and push a button to tell it to update itself. If you're unsure, check with Commonwealth or Visual Edge to see how you know whether or not it's being updated properly. And if you have Windows 10, you can always go into the Health Center to make sure that all parts of your security on your computer are updated, and that's represented by the green check marks that we see here. If you have a red X as opposed to a green check mark, they make it really visually easy to see, okay? The next thing is, do you have unnecessary software? Now for me, here's the most important ones. Free games that may be actually spyware, or voice or communications software that you no longer use. So what I have circled here is I have Blue Jeans and I have Communicator. One is a video conferencing software and the other is a voice over IP software. I don't use either of them anymore. The reason those are important is that if you're not updating those on a regular basis, that type of application will keep ports open on your Windows firewall to help it communicate better, which creates a security risk for you in some cases. Now, we don't expect you to be a computer expert. All I'm saying is that if you go through your list of programs and you see a bunch of things that you don't know if you need to use, but you're unsure if it's okay to uninstall them, check with your IT pros so that they can help you. The next thing is if you've been provided a VPN so that you can connect to your company's network, Visual Edge and Commonwealth are going to be counting on you using that to know that you're connecting securely to the company network. If they've provided it to you, they need you to use it, right? If they didn't provide a VPN and they gave you a different form of remote access to your computer, that's another thing. But don't let not using the VPN be something that is okay for you. So if they gave you a VPN and you're not sure how to use it, if it slows your computer down for some reason, if you're not sure how to disconnect from it when you're done, these are all important questions that you can ask your IT pros, and they're going to help you out to make sure you're using it the right way. The next one here is your computer may be set to automatically connect to a Wi-Fi signal that at one time could be within range of your home, and because your home network wasn't working, you connected to somebody else's Wi-Fi that was an open Wi-Fi with no password. If it remembered that setting, it could be automatically connecting to a different Wi-Fi without you realizing it. Make sure that you go into the settings and forget the network of any Wi-Fi that you don't want to be connecting to so that your computer doesn't automatically connect to something that is less secure than you think you're connecting to. Again, it may seem kind of high level for you, and if you're not understanding or following that, these are quick things that are very easy for Visual Edge and Commonwealth to check on your behalf. The next one's a little bit trickier, and I recommend this one for people that might be the CEO or the president or somebody that handles sensitive financial information for a company's network. So if you're the CFO, controller, accounts payable, accounts receivable, even human resources, I want you to be aware, if you have a home network where everything is on the same network, Apple TV, Ring security camera, your refrigerator, there's a whole bunch of Internet of Things or home devices that when they are installed out of the box and you're following the instructions, it tells you how to join it to your Wi-Fi network, but those manufacturers are not making sure that they are secure. They're not updating them on a regular basis. They're not checking for you to make sure that you've changed the default password. And the hackers have tools that will scour the network for those open devices, use the default password, and get right into your home network where they have access to your computer now. So it's really important that you are segregating your home network, that you have one network just for your computer that's locked down appropriately with the Wi-Fi password, and that you have all the rest of your devices on a different network so that they can't make your computer vulnerable. Again, this is kind of a high level thing, but if you're doing any kind of sensitive financial transactions, you want to know about this one and you want to fix it, okay? The next one, locking your computer when it's not in use. Now, you might think that's kind of silly if you're working from home and you're like, why would I have to lock my computer when I walk away? Well, if you have children, teenagers, spouses, and you're all sharing the same computer, and if you have any kind of sensitive information on that computer that you're using, that's your business or even like your tax returns, you know, you want to make sure that you're treating the privacy of this data the same as you would if you were in the office. So here's my rule of thumb. When you're working from the office, if you get up and walk away and your habit is that you do Control-Alt-Delete and you lock your computer, or if your office computer automatically locks after 3 minutes or 5 minutes of inactivity to protect that computer, and when you get back and you sit down at the office, you have to do Control-Alt-Delete and enter a password to start working again, that same rule of thumb should be followed for your home computer. What you're doing is protecting the people in your house from accidentally doing something on that computer or with the company data that they didn't mean to do. Now, if you work with any kind of medical, healthcare records, personally identifiable information, you could even be breaking the law and subjecting your company to a big fine if you're leaving that information open on the screen and other people are in the house, right? We don't want to break any HIPAA laws. So it's really important that you're protecting it the right way. So speaking of that, if you're sharing the computer with other people, make sure they have their own user profile configured on that computer. If it's a minor or a teenager, you would want to consider going into their user profile and making sure that you have the parental controls configured on there. Again, something that Visual Edge or Commonwealth can be helping you out with. But if you, in my perfect world, everybody would have the financial resources to make sure that children, spouses, teenagers all have their own separate computers. So whatever they're doing, even if you have parental controls installed on it, whatever they're doing can't affect the company data on your computer. But I understand not everybody has the resources or even the space in a house to have multiple computers. So if you're all sharing one, let's at least make sure everyone's signing in with their own username and password so that you logging in with your username and your password is going to keep your data segregated from the rest of the users. Got passwords? I think we all do. So here's one of the things most people don't realize is once a hacker gets onto your computer, the very first thing that they do is go into the browser and scrape all of those passwords out of the browser. So if you're saving your passwords in the browser, someone like me, someone like Brian, someone like Travis can get into that computer and scrape those passwords out, right? It's not a very high level skill set to steal those passwords out of the browsers. The other thing is that once a hacker is on your computer, the first thing they'll do without you knowing is run a search for anything that has the word password in it. So if you have a document on your computer, a Word document or an Excel document that you've used to save all of your usernames and passwords for all the different websites, banking sites, what have you, please, number one, you should never save it on your computer. Maybe print it out, keep a handwritten copy, put a copy in your safety deposit box. But number two, if you have to save it on your computer, if you're going to say, Joy, there's no way I'm going to change how I do this, let's at least change the name of that file to something like Mom's Chicken Soup Recipe. Please don't call it passwords. Please make it just a little bit harder to be found by the hackers, okay? I recommend using a password manager. If you don't have one, you can check with Visual Edge or Commonwealth to see what is a password manager and does it make sense for us and our business. How about a DNS filter? Now, these acronyms throughout cybersecurity, everyone's always like, what does DNS stand for? It doesn't matter, but it's domain name servers. DNS, really what I'm talking about is a filter that lives on your computer that's going to block any websites that are known to be malicious. It's a separate tool and it's very inexpensive. So a lot of companies may have DNS filters at the office and running on the firewall itself, which means that when you're sitting at your office computer, if you go to type in, you click on a website from an email, or you go to type in a website that you want to visit, and that website is known to be malicious, at the office, the firewall might block you from going to it, and you get this screen that says the administrator has blocked access to this website. If you don't already have that at your office, you need to get it. Very inexpensive, makes so much sense. But the thing is that people don't have these on their home computers generally. So what I want you to do is, if you're not already running a DNS filter, consider doing that. It's one of the most effective ways to protect you as a human being from accidentally doing something that you didn't mean to do. And the thing is, even if you're really good at identifying what's a malicious website or what is a real and valid website, sometimes those valid websites get infected also. They may not know it, and they may have people going to their website getting infected. So this kind of DNS filter will still protect you from those valid websites while they're infected. And then the DNS filter will remove that block once that valid website has cleaned up the infection. So the next thing, we mentioned this once, but if you're using any kind of remote access software, and we saw this happen in the news, a ton of people flooded to using Zoom, just like we're using now, at the outset of COVID, because everybody was working remotely and needed video conferencing software right away. I don't mean to pick on them, but this was in the media and a lot of people know about it. The Zoom software was not as secure as it could have been. So they have been issuing constant updates. I think twice a week when I'm using my Zoom, as I go to close it, it says, a Zoom update is available. Would you like to install it? Those are muy importante. You have to install them immediately. Whatever platform you're using for video calls and even voice over IP, which is known as a soft phone, if you have the ability to dial somebody on your computer and speak to them through your internet, whatever platform you're using or application, if it prompts you for an upload or a update, do that right away. Now this one is less common if you don't use Google Chrome. But a lot of people are using Google Chrome these days because it is a very effective, safe browser to be using. But sometimes when you're on a website with Google Chrome, it says there's an extension available for this website. Would you like to download it? And what that is it's a little plugin that helps that website render better if you're going to use that website over and over and over again. The problem is this starts to create a little library of those plugins within Google. And that library has not been maintained by Google. As a matter of fact, it came out in the news not too long ago that over 500 of those plugins were actually malicious now. Because Google is not making sure that they're being updated and have security applied, as those people who created those for their websites put them into the Google platform. So if you have Google extensions, you might want to open that library and just delete all the ones that you don't use. And that way you can get rid of the ones that might be infecting your computer and not knowing it. Speaking of, Google Chrome or maybe Firefox, should you be using a different browser than the ones that are built in? So on the Mac, you have Safari as the built-in go-to browser. On the PC, you have Internet Explorer. Sometimes you have Edge. And a lot of people ask me, should I be using a different browser? Yes. That's a fast, short answer. It doesn't matter if you have a Mac or you have a PC. What I want you to consider is that Google Chrome and Mozilla Firefox for both of the Macs and the PCs, whichever one you want to use, just go into your settings to make sure that that is set as the default browser. That way, if you're in an email, and the email says, click here to do this. When you click that hyperlink that's going to open a browser, it's going to open the default, more secure browser. All right? If you have any questions on this, just ask your IT pros. That's what they're there for. And then a reminder, this comes to the security awareness training that I was mentioning earlier. When you're doing any kind of a web search, whether it's Google or Bing or whatever your favorite web search platform is, especially in today's times, the hackers immediately see what's happening worldwide and they spin up what's called a fake or malicious website. And the minute you click on that website in a Google search, it will infect your computer without you knowing it. They're just awful. I mean, these guys, the hackers, really what they're doing is preying on our sense of curiosity and people's wanting to do the right thing. So a lot of people, when an outbreak, a major, like the COVID-19, when you have tsunamis, when you have bad earthquakes, when we had the fires in Australia, I'm here to tell you within 24 hours of really bad news happening, there's going to be malicious websites showing up in those search results on Google, on Bing, and you won't know that you're clicking on a malicious website unless you're very careful and understand what is a valid website and what's a fake website. You can't go by that blue headline because that can say anything a hacker wants it to say. You need to go by the actual URL, which is the www part. And if you don't understand how to see whether a website is valid or invalid based on that URL, you need to learn, because that security awareness training is going to save your hiney. We want to make sure you're doing it the right way and that you're going to those websites that are valid, that deserve you to really be checking them out, right? And don't be click happy with your emails either. I have a list of some of the common things that people have at their office that are protecting those human beings, right? And what we want to do is make sure that as you're going through these things on your home computer, you're looking at all of the things that you're doing, understanding that you're missing several layers of cybersecurity that would normally be infecting you, or more normally be protecting you, not infecting you. So when you're doing web-based email instead of using Microsoft Outlook might normally have some kind of a header on it that explains to you that it's prevented a download or that it's an external email. And when you're working on a web-based email platform, you may or may not see those same indicators. So you have to slow down, be really careful. One of my favorite things to remind people about right now is this is what used to happen when I was in an office, is that we would see, someone on our team would see that there's an email from someone posing to be our attorney, our CPA, whatever it is, and it would be asking for something like a copy of the W-2 reports, or here's your W-2 report, please open it up to see if it's accurate. And you're like, well, that's weird. Why would they send that to me, right? And then you realize you're looking at it a little closer and that's a fake email. And what you want to do is let everyone in your office know right away, don't click on that email. So what do? When you're in the office, you turn around and you're like, Henry, that's not really from our CPA. Don't open that email. But I'm working remotely right now and Henry can't hear me. So have you guys set up a form of communication where you're alerting Visual Edge, Commonwealth, and all of your coworkers not to open suspect emails if they're making it through those filters, right? What is that chain, that form of communication that you have? If you haven't set one up, again, another thing, it's a little thought-provoking. How do we do this when we're all spread out in our homes, working all different kind of hours, right? So talk about it. The final one on my list of 18 things is backing up the data. Now, for me, this is particularly important because when people sometimes work through a VPN, they may be annoyed that they experience slowing, they can't see the data that they're used to in the way they're used to seeing it. When they're doing a remote desktop, it may be slower, whatever that is. So you know what the tendency is for most people is to copy off a couple of documents that they work on a regular basis, knowing they're the only person that accesses that document. And then they put that onto their home computer and they think, you know, for the next 3 months, since I'm going to be stuck here anyways and no one else needs access to this document, I'm just going to work off of this on my home computer. Number one, you could be breaking a serious law. If you are HIPAA compliant, if you have any contracts through the government, if there's any kind of privacy laws that would apply to your business, your state, your industry, you could very well be breaking the law and subject to some heavy fines. Number two, integrity-wise, you just don't want to be copying sensitive information off of the company network and onto your home computer. What if somebody comes in and steals that computer? What if you don't have a surge protector and your hard drive is fried because all of a sudden the power goes out in your home? You could be 3 months into working on a document that you've made many changes to. You haven't backed it up and your hard drive dies. Who's going to save you? I don't know who you call in a situation like that. So let's really think closely about what is being backed up, What data is being saved where? Is this being done correctly according to our IT policies? And if I have any questions at all about it, should I take the time to ask somebody? Yes, 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 yes. That's what I'm saying here. So I do have a question. We have I'm always curious to see, for security awareness training, I just walked through some very common things that people might or might not know about home offices and working remotely. So I'd like to see if we can do another poll. We might have one here about security awareness training. I'm curious if anybody watching today has received any form of security awareness training. It's just a yes or a no. Like, how do you avoid email phishing scams? Let's take a look and see, according to our audience here. And again, we're going to wait till we have 80% of you answering so that we have a really good sampling. And then we're going to go ahead and close it and share the results with you. These are kind of fun. I'm giving a minute here and make sure everybody's answered. This is where you see who's paying attention, or if they just turned around and went to get some more, a sandwich for lunch or something, right? Let's see here. All right, what do you think? Should we go ahead and close it and share out the results?
Yeah, I think we close it, Joy. Yep.
Super. Let's see what they said. Have you received some form? Almost 80% of you have received some form of security awareness training. Now, what I just walked you through is a sample of full, more robust security awareness training. So we asked if you've received it in relation to phishing scams, but know that there's a lot more than just phishing scams that your company might want to be aware of. And that is the kind of service, like an organized and managed type of security awareness training delivered online. There's like 8 to 10 minute videos. There's email phishing, where you were tested to see who's actually clicking on things without it actually infecting your computer. There's all kinds of ways that Visual Edge and Commonwealth can be helping you out to make sure you have a baseline and you know that your staff are progressing and getting better at security awareness as they move along. So with that, I finished the training that I'm going to do today, and I want to bring it back now to Travis and to Brian. See if we have any questions.
Thank you very much, Joy, and obviously Travis, for you guys being able to participate in this today. And Joy, obviously your time helping actually putting together and doing the presentation for us today. Thank you very much for doing that. We wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance while we have the panelists available here until the end of the hour. If there's any questions that you would like to ask, please make sure to throw those down in the Q&A and let us know which panelists you would like to be able to have a response from. Travis is obviously very much heavily on the engineering side, so a little more technical. I would suggest going towards Travis. Best practices industry-wide, what is being seen across the industry, best practices, things along those lines. Joy obviously has a phenomenal view with all the thousands of people that she's working from directly and supporting across the entire country, and some global input as well that she's got there. So let's open it up to some questions and see what winds up coming in. I think the training was so thorough. Everybody already responded to that they could have possibly wanted to know.
They could be. And you know, the other thing that I find sometimes when I do these trainings is that people don't want to ask about specific things in that list that I went through because they don't want it, you know, answered in front of everybody, but they end up coming to Visual Edge or Commonwealth and saying, hey, you know, Joy talked about this or that. Is that something we should look at?
Hey, Brian, we're getting a couple of questions, or at least one question here about a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. Are we going to be able to share that with the attendees?
Yes. So that's part of this entire process, right? And what we wound up being able to create the webinar series around is creating that technology playbook, because we know that it starts with IT. right? And Joy is here today to help us set that foundation of the things we need to be able to be aware of when working distributed. But each one of these episodes is going to continue to build on. This is the awareness and the uh-oh moment for I knew there were things I didn't know about, but I didn't know what I don't know. So now that I've got a bit of an introduction to it, right, we've got the 18 things that we need to be able to make sure that we're focusing on, but how do we prioritize and take those steps along the way to make sure that we're not just trying to fill the gap today? Because filling the gap today, we all probably can anticipate as well that the landscape, the business landscape, is going to look a whole lot different. As companies start to continue to find that you can work in a distributed environment, do we need as much equipment? Do we need as much floor space? Do we need as much real estate? But oh, by the way, how the heck do I get there? And how do I not lose money trying to do this, but use my technology more effectively and strategically to plan on making that transition from everybody in to the agility of having people in and out, and make sure that we're obviously respecting what we're all going through right now. So making those proper investments, we need a plan, we need a roadmap. This is the starting point. We will be, for all attendees that do attend, sending out each one of these presentations as a chapter so that you have the answers you need on what that playbook is going to look like, and you can continue to build that playbook and follow the template that we're providing for you. So hopefully that provides an answer to that one question. I'm a sales guy, so I can get a little bit long-winded. Did that help?
Never.
Yeah, I think that was well said. And I think the other thing we're seeing is people by and large are agreeing that it's not going to be a situation where, okay, COVID is done, everyone go back to work. You know, what we're kind of expecting is like rolling brownouts where you can, and then you have to go work from home again, and then you work at the office, and then you work from home again. So I think it's going to be here to stay for a while, and people are going to want to have a more and more robust security posture at their home offices.
Yeah. Joy, I would agree. We've heard a lot of people say that they may not ever go back to the office, or at least except for meetings or whatnot. So.
Right.
This is going to be a process to be able to go through, but hopefully through this process, we're helping to educate you. Again, not sales focused. This is more to bring the awareness and help you develop a strategic plan. So the investments you're making allows technology to enable you, not put you at risk. And also those that are making the right strategic plans are going to be the ones that are going to emerge from this much stronger and more strategically positioned to grow, as opposed to those that are just trying to react, invest now, and continue revenue loss because they have to make continued investments.
Mm-hmm.
What is
I think
a
we have
common
one last
starting point for
poll.
business to begin
Go
on
ahead.
looking for these processes? Yep. So the first step is actually what we're going to wind up. Actually, I'm going to back up a little bit there for a second. The first step is making sure that you have these 18 steps and check on the health of your network, unless Joy and Travis, you guys have a different viewpoint on that. And then from there, it would be taking a look at the next presentation, which would be in 2 weeks, with your teammate, Joy, Drew Sanford over there, about why it's important to take a look at your network assessment and really understand what the needs are so that you can prioritize the gaps and continue to build upon it.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the last statistic I saw is that cybercrime has increased 43% with the COVID because of the fact that so many people are vulnerable working remotely and don't realize it. 43% in just the last couple of months. So that 18 things checklist, the first step I would say is just to go through the checklist with you, you know, to sit down and say, all right, as far as I know, for my staff members, this is what we're looking at, and just kind of see what makes the most sense as the first things on that checklist to be tackled.
No. And with the volume of people that are working remotely, unless, you know, Travis and Joy, I'm kind of throwing this to you guys, but with the volume of people that are working remotely right now, organizations that feel like they have their hands around this entirely with every single employee that's working remotely, I don't think they've really got a full-on grasp of what's coming their way or what they've been subjected to during this time, because it's the silent the silent killer on the inside that's tunneling in and just waiting and continuing to collect data that they're not aware of yet, that's probably coming in through a lot of those home office networks. What would you guys think?
Yeah, Joy, bringing back Joy, one of Joy's slides, see something, say something. The biggest thing I would say end users are having a problem with at this point is, you know, did I do that? Oh my gosh, I don't want to admit that I did that. You know, it's better to admit it that if you did something accidentally, clicked on something, because sooner or later it's going to come out, and the faster it can be acted upon, the better everybody else is. So.
And not just for the company data, like I really want to stress how important a individual's privacy and their own sensitive financial information is. A lot of people don't realize that, you know, it's the very first time I dealt with ransomware in 2014 was one of my clients got ransomware on a home computer, and he said all of our tax returns, our home mortgage paperwork, all of the pictures of our daughter since birth, we have to get all of this stuff back. You know, and that made me realize, oh my gosh, and back in 2014, I was hypersensitive to the privacy and protection of home data, because that is the whole world. Like that to the company, it's one thing, and to the individual, their own financial information is another.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah.
So as we're wrapping all this up here, I think we've got a final poll to be able to throw up there. Is that right? There it is. Travis, you want to help to close this out here?
We've got a few questions here. So, would you like to be registered for the next webinar of this series on Wednesday, June 3rd at 11 a.m. Eastern? It's your network infrastructure security, the modern day need for SOC is the first one. The second question, would you like one of our experts to reach out to discuss your IT security? Third, did you take away some new information today? We'd just like to know if, you know, if this was all pretty much what you guys had already heard, or if it's some new information. What topics you would like to discuss in the future or learn more about in the future, and then multiple choice on that. So there's plenty of options in the certain categories that we offer as Visual Edge and Commonwealth. So we really appreciate everybody joining us today, and hopefully this was good information to take away.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be of service to you.
Thank you, Joy.
We have a number of people behind the scenes that also helped us pull this off today. Not only the entire Commonwealth Technology and Visual Edge IT team, Sean Reed, Holly Dale, a number of others that I want to make sure we thanked very publicly for all of the effort, time, and blood, sweat, and tears, and also putting up with a number of us being able to pull this thing off in this manner. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.